Hey, Craig, I know you're traveling today. So let me
Oh
just
yeah.
see the wildest travel story I've ever had in my entire life.
Oh.
Um, I had this opportunity 8 years ago where I was invited to go to Korea, and my mom, who's an amazing soul, offered to give me a ride to the airport. And she said, "Where are you going this time on this trip?" And I said, "I'm going to Korea." And my mom said, "Which one? South or north?" And my mom is like super smart, and I couldn't lie to her. And I said, "Mom, I'm actually going to both." And there was like this awkward silence. And then she turns to me and she says, "Can I come with you?" I'm like, "No, Mom, you can't come to North Korea with me." And so I was on this expedition with a bunch of Americans authorized to go to North Korea on a learning journey. And we land in Pyongyang, and there is like, airport military all around us. And I just look at myself, I'm like, holy, what did I just do? I do not have insurance to get me in case I need to get extracted out of North Korea. And it was like absolutely the wildest trip I've ever had in my life. And that was crazy. I definitely did not have any extraction insurance. But I am delighted to be here. My name is Kian Gohar, and I'm an insurance dude today.
Insurance dudes are on a mission to escape being handcuffed by our agencies.
How? By uncovering the secrets to creating a predictable, consistent, and profitable agency sales machine.
I am Craig Pretzinger.
I am Jason Feldman.
We are agents.
We are insurance dudes.
Oh, yeah. What were you doing in North Korea?
We were going on a people-to-people expedition organized by an American organization here to learn about the history and culture of North Korea. And we got to see some fascinating things. We got to talk to some local people, and it was the wildest place I've ever been because it looks like nothing anywhere else on the planet, because there's no advertisements, there's no billboards. So like when you're driving down the streets or walking down the streets, which you don't really do, it just feels like you're like in this like alternative universe that basically avoided all of commercialism for the last 100 years. It's just really, really bizarre place. And I was grateful that I got to go, but I was even happier to come back.
It's so wild, right? Like when you travel, you go, like if you go to, like I went to Portugal, everything's a little different, right? I'm in Costa Rica, everything's the plugs, like the light switches. But there, like think about it, nobody's interacted or helped them besides Dennis Rodman. And, and it's like, so which I, right? So, I mean, it's interesting. Like they've had to engineer everything themselves, right? So everything is like been created from a different point of view. So everything does just look different.
It's so bizarre because, we can have a long conversation about like how unique they are. But I guess the one thing I'll say is that people are people wherever they are, whether they are in, the US, whether they're in places that are oppressed. People just want the same things. They want their kids to grow up healthy. They want their kids to go to school. They want jobs. They want food. And while the world is at war, people generally just want the same thing. And so if we give them, if we have grace with each other and allow us to like understand each other better, even these really complex, crazy places that sound like should be no-go zones allow us to really connect with our humanity. So that's the one thing I'll leave with that story.
Did you drink margaritas with the leader?
I did not, but I'll tell you this: you're only allowed to stay in one hotel in Pyongyang, which is for foreigners, and they have this bar downstairs, and they had the best beer I've ever had in my entire life. And I'm like, how is that possible? And it's because way back in the 1950s, the East German communists would go to North Korea, and they helped them develop these microbreweries. And so like these microbreweries still exist in Pyongyang, and the beer was really delicious. Who knew?
Oh, wow. That's wild. Dude, so that there's cameras and all like they're watching you sleep.
Everything.
Are they watching everything? Like they're in the bathroom?
I don't know how sophisticated they are with inside the hotel rooms and stuff. Some of it is very, very primitive. It's not developed in the way that we would see now in much of the developed world. It's very, very primitive in a lot of parts of the country. So I don't think they even think about like recording a lot of that stuff.
How's
Interesting.
the food?
If I never have kimchi again in my life, it will be a day too soon.
like it. I love me some kimchi. It's really
Was
good
it
food.
at every meal?
It was at every meal, and I'll be very honest. We had limited food, and they had really gone out of their way to provide us with food, and so they really made an effort because we were coming on behalf of an American organization. They wanted to show their best foot forward, and that was lovely. But we didn't have enough food, and there were days where I'd have like a tea bag, and my colleague who was on the same trip would have like an extra piece of toast, and I'd barter. I'd say, "Hey, I'll give you my tea bag for your extra piece of toast," and that's how we got through it. But for the North Koreans, this was like a huge luxury that they didn't even have these kinds of foods, and they were like offering it to us. And so again, politics can really make people upset in ways that we think is crazy, but like on an individual level, people really try to do their best to help each other, and even on the food front. So we helped each other get through that week with sharing our food that we were able to even get, which most North Koreans would not have access to.
Wow, that is wild. I mean, that's what an experience. Very few people.
Very few people.
Super cool. So I definitely want to get into the, like we were just talking about, being humans. I definitely want to get into the AI human conversation. I want to know your past. I want to know also about you. So you pronounce your name Kian.
Kian. It's just like Keanu Reeves with Keanu without the "oo."
But way cooler.
Do you have an interesting story about that?
So I always introduce myself to people. I'm like, my name is Kian Gohar, and when they can't pronounce it correctly, I'm like, it's like Keanu without the "oo." And then I lived in LA, and a couple of years ago, I was at the Chateau Marmont for dinner with my family, and in walks in Keanu Reeves. And so, of course, I go up to him and I introduce myself. I'm like, Keanu, my name is Kian. I always introduce myself as Keanu without the "oo." And just the look on his face was like very, very unamused.
He's off.
God, I love that story.
Imagine though, you're Keanu, right? Like all day long, every single day, people come up with you with something they think is an original, right? Like,
that is pretty original, though. I bet he hasn't heard that one.
I bet you, like that probably was right an actual original. But how often? Like it's just like
it was wild. It was wild.
Yeah,
that is wild. So your history, your backstory is so interesting. Take us back. Well, you can go to childhood if you want, but like, like, how did you get where you're at now? I know you have a killer story about that.
So I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and starting companies, starting venture capital firms, running companies, and lots of great chapters and stories, some of which succeeded and some which didn't. But I'll tell you about the most recent part. So about, I'll step back for a second. In 2011, I left my last entrepreneurial business, which was a startup in South Florida making kite surfing equipment of all things. And it was a wonderful company and group of people that I was with. And I had done it for 5 years, and I needed a break to figure out what was next. So I bought a one-way ticket to Africa, and I spent 6 months trekking across Africa from Cape Town to Cairo in a truck and camping out every night in the tent. And this is a whole other story, which is super wild. But when I was in northern Ethiopia, so just about 5 weeks away from the end of my destination, I got a text message from my brother saying, "Dad passed away. Please come home now." And my dad passed away in an accident. And so within 24 hours, I was back in LA, where I'm from. And I ended up spending the next year taking care of family affairs. And after a year, I was like, okay, well, it's time to go build another company, figure out what to do next. And I ended up actually being introduced to a gentleman named Peter Diamandis, who is the founder and was the CEO of the XPRIZE Foundation, a technology nonprofit here in LA. And we ended up getting along like a house on fire. And I know that's bad in the insurance world, but this is great in relationship.
Yeah.
And he invited me to join the XPRIZE Foundation and help them build a new business around technology education. So the XPRIZE is this amazing nonprofit in LA that was founded in 1996 by Peter to basically solve this problem. The problem was, how do we build a spaceship that's privately funded and goes to outer space? Because up until then, only organizations like NASA, the European Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency had gone to space. And Peter wanted to democratize access to space travel. And so he launched this competition, $10 million to whomever could build the first privately funded spaceship. And this competition went on for 8 years, ultimately was won by a company that licenses technology to Richard Branson and is now Virgin Galactic. So the organization knows a ton about like innovation and exploration and like new technologies. And Peter wanted to basically create a new way for the foundation to monetize and raise revenue by teaching companies about innovation. So I joined this foundation, and for the better part of the next decade, I was an executive director at the XPRIZE Foundation in LA, helping teach companies about these disruptive new technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing. I got suddenly immersed in this world of deep tech and Silicon Valley that I had never really anticipated being in. And I did this very successfully, probably, I don't know, coached thousands of CEOs from companies all across the world through this experience. And the lesson that I had by about 2017, 2018 was that if we're going to go live in a world where we work side by side with AI and with robots, the thing that actually will give us competitive advantage compared to technology is not whether we're good at being at AI, but rather if we are good at being humans and the kinds of skills that allow us humans to have competitive advantage, like emotional intelligence, complex problem solving, empathy, all those kinds of things, which we learn in kindergarten, but we kind of forget about by the time we get to adults. And so for the better part of the last 5 years, my firm Geolab does leadership development training, helping teams become better at being more high productive by learning these soft skills and allowing us to really lean into what makes us better humans, because that's all we got when we as humans need to work side by side with AI in a very near future.
I love it. What were you going to say, Craig?
Walk me through meeting with somebody, with a client that you're gonna help with these things, and something that's a train wreck, maybe the opposite of that house fire that you had with your buddy that you met, that was really challenging, and how you were able to change the organization, change the thinking, and really just improve the overall situation for them.
Well, I don't want to give you a generic answer, but because for confidentiality, I can't go into details, but I
need their phone number and their
let's dox them now. The reality is that like these new technologies that sound like science fiction, like AI and robots and spaceships, all of that is actually like reality now. And organizations are using them to get better solutions to problems for themselves and their clients. The limitation I think a lot of companies have and a lot of organizations have and leaders have is that we're humans. We learn a certain way of doing things, and then we want to keep repeating those certain way of doing things because it works, it's safe, and we default to those. And instead, we should be like going to the gym and learning new skills, but we don't want to do that because nobody likes going to the gym. And so for a lot of companies, their leadership, their teams, they want to just keep doing work the way they've done for the last 20 years because that's how we've learned how to do it. And that's human behavior. But we have to stop and be like, okay, now we've got these new tools and new technologies. Should we be doing the same things we've done in the past, or should we be doing it differently? And that's hard. And so my work with companies is helping teams learn these new behaviors of how to interact with AI, and then also how do we make sure that we as a team are really benefiting from that, and we're also leveraging those resources to solve human problems. And so my work is really that, is like changing mindsets. That's the first step. And a lot of companies just don't even think about the mindset shift. That's like the most important thing.
It's interesting how much has changed just in the last 5 years, right? Since COVID. Well, and you could go back to the internet and all that, right? Like just everything in the last 20 years has been so remarkably changed by technology. And here we are, now there's this study with the brain cells being connected to the computer chip, and it's actually carrying out functions. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like it literally is like the future from when we were kids, So
the future will never be as slow as it is today, and
which is wild,
super wild. And so many new technologies and inventions are happening. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of like overwhelming amount of information. Like, how do we live? And so I think, our responsibility as leaders is to try to like minimize some of the noise and like reduce some of the hype and think about, okay, what are like the 1 or 2 or 3 things that are going to really transform the world and my world? And how can I make sure that the people that I care about are also knowledgeable about these things so that we have like better lives? So, one of the things, the technologies that's going to change everything is this idea of like genomics. Like, how can we make sure that we can live healthier and longer beyond what has been human lifespan? Right now, the average lifespan in the US is like some 80, 81, something like that. But children born today, their average lifespan will be 100 years old. That's going to mean that we're going to have a lot more people living longer than we've been used to in human history. And that's going to have a whole lot of impacts. Like, for example, we're going to have a lot more people in the workforce longer. That's going to impact retirement and social security benefits. And people are going to need a lot more healthcare in the long term and elder care. And so all these things like actually have like dramatic impacts on us and our children and our grandchildren if we're lucky. And so this is a technology that's going to radically shift how we as humans live. And we individuals might not have like ability to change it, but we should be aware of it so that we can figure out what kind of path should we be taking to live in this world where humans live a lot longer. And this is all because of these new technologies. That's just one example. I mean, we also know just even in the last year, new technology like generative AI has seemingly come out of nowhere, even though it hasn't been nowhere. It's been in the works for a long time. That right. Like ChatGPT that has totally transformed how we work and communicate. And we can talk about that as well. But I'm super excited about the future because I feel like these technologies allow us to democratize access to a lot of things that historically people didn't have access to, whether it was education or healthcare. So these are all like global goods that people will have access to because of these new technologies. And so I'm optimistic for the future, but there's just a lot of noise. There's a lot of things happening, and we have to be very conscious about minimizing some of that noise so that we don't get distracted.
Well said. Yeah, definitely.
So much data.
Yeah, and there is a lot of noise about it. I think it's interesting. Like we were talking the other day about leads and sales and AI and just like all this stuff. And I think what is interesting to me is that even though that, things are going to be more regulated and everybody has access to everything, I find it really interesting, like that it's allowing David to compete with Goliath for the first time. Like a kid is going to be able to use AI to gain knowledge, to become a better athlete, to build out a team where he can grow a company, and maybe it's just him. Like the idea of like solopreneurship or very small teams that are making big impact is so cool to me. Where it's like I see like in the future where the corporate model, when you have all these layering of management and all this stuff, I just see that kind of like that not having the advantage because it's too big and too just
And I mean, the modus operandi is preserve and protect, right? Like I have this job. I don't want to learn anymore. I don't want to advance. I'm good. I'm just want to protect my cubicle, right? It's just like no innovation, and it's going to die.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like there's going to be only two kinds of companies in the future: companies that use AI and dead companies. So which one do you want to be with, right?
Right.
And to your point, Jason, about like solopreneurs and small teams and small companies being able to accomplish a lot more than was historically possible, because those large companies, they had they pooled their resources together, they pooled the people together, and they were able to get like economies of scale, and they were able to get like lower prices, and that's how they basically created these massive monopolies for decades. And now every entrepreneur, solopreneur has access to many of these similar tools that historically they would never have had. So,
and I think it's important also to distinguish that the generation now, like younger than my generation, the millennials, and then the next younger one, have had access to so much more information and knowledge that like we just didn't have, right? Unless we want to ride our bike to the library, and right. So I mean, these guys with podcasts, with everything, just it's amazing. My 18-year-old son knows a hell of a lot more at 18 than I did at 18, right? Because of listening to podcasts, listening to Rogan, consuming just various ways of information from, YouTube and all the other non-traditional.
I mean, just imagine if you're an insurance dude, you run an agency, you have a small team, and you want to grow, and you have let's say a regulated environment. And it's hard to grow because you need to have more revenue to be able to hire more staff. But you can't really do that because it's like a chicken and egg problem.
Right.
So imagine if you can use these AI. Yeah. Imagine these AI tools like ChatGPT to be able to do a lot of the work more effectively, more efficiently, faster. So for example, I was working with a company earlier this year as part of this major research project we did on AI. Is to how could you use AI to identify new revenue streams, or to be able to identify leads much more effectively. And so you can actually use ChatGPT to solve a lot of those problems when you as a solopreneur would historically never be able to do. So I can ask ChatGPT and say, identify the top 10,000, ways that I can find new leads or new clients in this particular market. And then I can use ChatGPT to think about, okay, if I want to grow my business 15% this year in this particular market with this particular product, what are the 10 recommendations that you can give to me that I can follow to be able to do that? And it's essentially like this personal coach, business coach that you can rely on that we've never had before. And so to your point, Jason, the David and Goliath story is changing. And I'm much more interested in being on Team David than I am on being on Team Goliath now.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we Craig and I both have agencies with a large corporate parent company, and it's just like watching the world go around the way it is. It's interesting because I see so many agents that are independent agents or something that have some access to tools that are just crazy great. And it's just interesting how corporations are going to navigate some of this stuff just because they're just so layered. And I just can't imagine anything with how fast technology is moving, how anything's going to get through in time to
it's the two opposing forces. It's like the slowest moving industry when it comes to technology in a time when technology is moving faster than it ever has, and it's going to just keep taking off. I think the obvious, what normally happens in that situation.
Yeah, we actually ended up working with a major insurance company this year that was super innovative and wanted to lean in to AI and these technologies. And so I think you have in any industry, a few people who really want to be early adopters and are willing to experiment and to run small tests and see what works. And then you have people who just are comfortable with milking the cow and until, that's done. And maybe I think in the insurance industry, you have fewer people who are willing to, be early adopters than maybe some in other industries, but they exist. And, what I would say to folks who run agencies is identify just one small problem that you have that you want to have a better solution to, and use that as a starting point to have a conversation with AI, like ChatGPT or whichever one you want to use, and ask it questions to help you solve that one problem. You're not going to become AI fluent or AI conversationally capable overnight. It's just like if you want to become, Olympic gymnastics champion, you don't do that overnight. You practice. And so the way I recommend practicing is take a small bite, find one small problem that you have, and take that question to ChatGPT and start having a conversation with it and asking it like, how can I solve this problem? And eventually you'll start developing like the skills and feel more confident. And before you know it, you'll have maybe like 5 of those little small experiments that you've run. And you're now moving your business like a lot forward faster than your competitors are. And certainly than some of the bigger players are. And so like, this is all eminently doable and learnable. And that's why I'm just so excited about it.
It's even possible to have as many as thousands of these projects working at the same time.
Absolutely.
If you're really crazy. Just keep asking questions and